Brand new. Welcome to the WealthTech podcast. I'm excited to have you on the pod. I was wondering if you could just give a brief introduction and give an overview of Trusted Family.
100%. Well, first, thanks a lot, Mark. Thanks for inviting me. A really pleasure to be here in this podcast today. So my name is Arnaud de Coninck. I'm Chief Revenue Officer in charge of the growth at Trusted Family. I've been working for Trusted Family for now over 13 years. Joined Trusted Family. It's a company that I discovered through our own family business. So I'm fortunate to also be a member of a Belgian family company called Solvay. It's a chemical company. And yeah, first users, first clients of Trusted Family. So saw it as a user, saw the impact it has as a user, and then decided to join the company to help grow and develop the firm around the world. Trusted Family is a company that employs around 30 people today. We have clients in over 30 different countries, over 210, 220 family offices, family businesses who are using our solution. We provide three things to families. One is what we call the technology, the Trusted Family Operating System, which really serves as a technology platform to help family businesses, family offices work together, communicate, prepare the rising generation, and make sure that they ensure a smooth transition to future generations. There's also another department called the Family Success, because at the end of the day, it's not the technology, it's the team we put in place, it's the content, it's the best practices, it's the way we adapt the platform for each family office that will make it a success, and it's the way we enroll it within the needs of the family office that will make it a success. And then the latest addition to our offering is what we call the family community, realizing the importance of sharing best practices amongst our clients around how do you communicate, how do you prepare the rising generation. I believe there's not enough value given to the people running the families, running the engagement, running projects for the family. And so we're bringing them together on an online platform to also help them share best practices, share learnings, suited and better formed, and be able to connect with other large families who do certain amazing things in their field. So really exciting times.
Well, I'm excited to get into it, not only to talk about your experience as a family member and the hundreds of conversations that you've had with families around next gen governance. Before we get into some of these, what makes Trusted Family unique?
So Trusted Family was created, over 15 years ago by a cousin of mine, Edward Janssen, and another family next-gen member called Edward Thyssen. So it was built from a need, I think, that we had in our own respective families, whereas we started organizing the governance of our family, started creating family councils, started creating family offices, all sorts of committees, and realized that what was really missing for us is the glue of how do we put everything together? How do we organize all our meetings? How do we organize all our information? How do we professionalize the way that, we share information within our families to make sure we don't miss out on anybody, right? So because it's too easy to forget someone in a BCC or in an email. It's so difficult to understand if an email that you've sent out has actually been reached, as if it's actually been read, if it's actually being well appreciated by the members of the family. And so, the initial premise is all about, how can we better, align our family members and align our stakeholders. So I think that's the first thing, is that it grew up from a need, and it was designed from family businesses, and it keeps being that way, right? We are in this niche family office, family business market. We only serve family offices and family businesses.
I love it. I love the fact this is a great example. I think Trusted Family of innovation that's born directly from the needs of families, and that this kind of purpose-built type of platform to be able to serve families and family offices is you're seeing more of it in a family office, and I think it's fantastic. I think it's good for the industry. I think it's good for families. I think it's good for the family office, and it's an exciting time when you see this type of innovation within the family office space needed. What are some of the main problems that families are coming to you, and then how have you seen that evolve over the past couple of years?
Yeah, I think some of the common problems. So, I mean, why do clients come to us? It can be very different depending on the family, right? And I think you've said that in the previous conversations we had. Is like once you've spoken to one family office, you've just spoken to one family office, right? So, before rolling out a project like this, we really, really need to understand what are the pain points that each families are solving in order to, to cater our conversation best for them, and so some families come to us saying, hey, they're having difficulties really, securing and distributing K1s and private files to each beneficiary in an easy way. The one that comes the most often, I believe, is this willingness to get the next generation on board, to start making sure that we start informing the next generation about the businesses, about informing the next generation about the family, the legacy, the values, what's been happening in the journey and the history of the company and the family, making sure they have access to certain information, make sure that they can ask questions around the family, make sure that they can also feel involved in the family. And, I think that is a lot of the problems that we see and that we solve through our application is, creating a safe space. And what's really funny is like, we often families also come to us because they want to, improve and make sure they prepare their succession, right? And succession feels sometimes to be a very rigid or structured. Like, no one likes to talk about succession. Let it be the senior generation, they don't necessarily want to talk about succession, and the next generation who also feel it's the business of their father or aunt. They don't necessarily see themselves fully involved, right? So, and I think one of the biggest advantages we see also here is the fact that you have a centralized place where anybody can go ahead and share information. Suddenly you start talking about themes and passing on a lot of information, and therefore dealing with this topic of succession without really knowing it. Suddenly the senior members, by just sharing documents, sharing files, sharing stories, they don't realize, but they're actually passing on a lot of knowledge. And for the next generation, it doesn't feel to be imposed with them. It's not like you receive an email saying, hey, have a look at this, and 99% sure the next gen is just going to archive it or not going to open their email. Here, they can consume the information at their own pace, in their own rhythm. They can also select, do they prefer topics around philanthropy? Do they prefer topics around education? Do they prefer topics around the business and the investments that the family is doing? And I think it's important to provide a space for everybody to feel welcomed and to consume the information that they want to consume and evolve in their own pace.
I think that's great. I mean, half of it is just finding the information if it's scattered on Google Drives and emails, and maybe you had access to that information, but you can't put your fingers on it. So having a centralized repository. But then I think also your point about self-discovery, maybe when you get that notification or email, it's not really a great time for you, but there are other times where you maybe want to dive a little bit deeper on what's going on with the next gen committee or the family business, and they can do that discovery on their own, which is fantastic. How do you see the platform evolving, especially if you talk about the digitization of the family office? Obviously, I think the next gen is digital native. How do you see platforms like Trusted Family evolving within the family wealth ecosystem?
Yeah, that's a great question, $1 million question, and an important one, I think. So both industries we're in, being the family office and the tech, are just going through a lot of development disruption, maybe even we can call it. I think from a family office, family business perspective, they've professionalized so much over the past 10 years. I can't even imagine how it's going to be over the next 10 years to come, right? With the rising generation coming on board, wanting to review a lot of the work that their parents are doing in order to be better suited for the younger generation behind them to come. So I think there's an ongoing development there of how families are operating together. Family offices are also professionalizing themselves a lot, putting governance aside, where they've set up all these committees, these working groups. It's not easy to learn how to work with your family, right? But you need to find a way to work with your family. So there's a lot of professionalism that more and more has come into play, which requires them to be well equipped. And then moving to the technology side, I think I mean, we're talking about AI. I think tomorrow, if your company doesn't have an AI built in or uses AI to develop, you're going to be obsolete, right? And we can talk more about that in maybe there's a special podcast just on that we should do once on with the
Sure.
wealth. But I think how I see it for Trusted Family is, so we've been extremely good at bringing all the stakeholders of a family together to work together and to communicate together. Where we're working on as we speak, and I think it will be the future, is what we call this. That's why we call the family operating system, is because I believe the right tool for the family is not having 10 tools, but having one tool that can integrate with all the systems that our clients are using. I think one of the biggest strengths of Trusted Family, it's a really easy tool to use for every generation. And having an integrated system that can embed with the accounting solutions, with the SharePoints, with the CRMs, with the financial technologies and dashboards that exist out there for financial reporting purposes, and to be able to have one central shop that can plug into all these environments, pull in the information and make them accessible via one single login to the users, I think is extremely powerful. And that's where Trusted Family is heading, at least. And I think that's where I think the future of Trusted Family makes a lot of sense, because there's a lot of new actors, a lot of technology providers today in the family office space, and not are all fit for everybody. But I think, for clients that uses tools, we need to be able to integrate with those and provide more value there, because certain family members are more interested in finance, as I said. But if they get a notification on their Trusted Family app on a financial dashboard that they receive from an external aggregator, once they're on the Trusted Family app, they'll be able to also see everything that happened new in the business, everything that happened new in the family, everything that happened new in the foundations or other projects that they're working on. And again, having everything centralized, I think, is a big added value to attract the different personas of the family.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think, providing that information to the family is one of the key functions that a family office does. But why do it for a separate portal or for a separate means where the family's already using this operating system? They're already using the Trusted Family portal, add another layer and some login that they're not going to use or forget about. And just one more moving part where you can kind of they can have that more holistic view is great. You're seeing a lot of progress has been made over, I think, the past 5 years in terms of best of breed type of technology experiences, and be able to plug and play. Family office can mix and match whatever makes sense for their business, right?
And imagine if once you have all those things plugged in a central place, and then you add a layer on AI there that could be like, hey, I want to do this investments, but does it align with all the data I have of the family on this platform? Does it align with the values? Does it align with our family constitution? What are some of the points I need to be careful of if I'm looking to do this investments? I mean, there's a lot of things that we can then do to really help families better perform, better invest, better align for them to better operate.
Yeah, this conversation with their data, right? And to be able to, in a natural language kind of way, be able to explore their family's legacy or the latest investment. That definitely sounds exciting. Let's talk about governance. Obviously, a key component of what Trusted Family does is around governance. What are some of the key pillars for effective family governance?
Well, when you look at our clients and the typical things that we maybe see most of the time, it can be, depending on the size of the family, but more and more of our clients have a family office because they want to separate often. Like there was one legacy business, but more and more of our clients, they don't just hold one business, they hold multiple businesses, multiple assets, and therefore structuring that through a family office makes a lot of sense. And they can also provide other services through the family office, which are, developing more and more, from concierge services to shareholder management and so much more. So a lot of our clients have a single family office, and we see, I think, there's, hundreds of family offices or thousands of family offices every year that gets created. And I think it's a proof that there's clearly a trend there. If you ask me, I think it's really important if a family is in the third generation to have someone in charge of family matters. There's the financial capital, which very often is the key focus first for the family office. And so this financial capital is often kind of looked at being one of the main things that needs to be looked at when you look at succession, or tackled when you look at succession. But I believe it's really, really crucial to have someone to look after the human capital side of things, to look at education, to look at how do you want to raise and engage with your rising generation? How do you want to inform them about the business? How much involvement do they want to have around the business, or do you want the family members to have around the business? And having people really looking after that, engaging, picking up their phones, speaking with the family members to make sure they're aligned with the vision, the values of the family, I think is extremely, extremely important. And so, often with our clients, the people who are most of the times in charge of the human capital is maybe once you have a family council, they're often the ones that kind of are the guardians of this human capital. They are the guardians of managing those relations, organizing family assemblies, organizing training materials, education programs. I did an amazing webinar with a client 2 weeks ago in the Middle East that talked about their generation to generation transition programs that they've set up. And I believe, if you don't want too much structure, I do think having someone in charge of looking at this new generation transition from an education standpoint, I believe is really an important one.
How are families preparing the next gen? What are some of the best practices that you've seen? And then also, where do you see kind of families going astray and not engaging, preparing the next gen?
Just to pause there on the whole topic on next gen, I had this conversation with a client the other day who told me that the first thing they did when they wanted to prepare the next gen was actually to prepare and educate the senior generation. And I found it really, really fascinating and enlightening, actually, to think it that way, because they first needed to get the senior generation to be aware of this transition, to be ready for it, to be educated, to be able to be hands off. Because I think the worst thing that you can do is, when you look at the next generation, is to kind of gradually involve them, but give them zero power or zero legitimacy or zero control over certain aspects of the family moving forward, right? It shouldn't be like a top-down approach. I see it more as a collaborative approach. And I think it starts by getting the senior generation probably aware that the timing is right, and aware of how their role will change, in order to make sure that there is room for the next generation to also rise. So I just found that fascinating to also look at it that way. I think what I see work a lot at our clients is kind of organizing, not necessarily summer camps, but sessions with families to learn about one another, learn who their cousins are, learn what their skill sets are, learn if what traits they are, because ultimately you'll need to one day be able to work with them, right? You cannot, like in a business again, choose who you hire because of his or her capabilities or skills. You need to either build them or learn to work with different people who have very different mindset, very different skills, and you don't have much choice than to work with them because they're family, right? So I think on the family aspects, I'm talking, right? On the business, you can always have external management, and I think it's maybe even a good practice when you start having certain generations. But from a family perspective, I think it's important to learn who your family members are, to educate themselves, to organize camps together, to try to get outside your trenches in a way. We have one client, they have kind of a 1-week military camp, because I think it's really when you surpass yourself that you can learn to live together also in a way, or that you create amazing memories. So every family again is different, right? But I think learning to live together, learning to what are the skill sets, and understanding also the skill sets of your family members is really important. Because once you have that and you know what is required to be a good shareholder or a good leader, then you can start planning and you can start building programs specific for each family member based on his or her skills, capacity, or, and it depends. If you're 10, 15, it's easy to do it one by one and really mentorships, do personal training programs. I still think it's possible when you're 100. It's a different budget, clearly, but I still think it's possible, and it's really important to do it. But once you start having more and more shareholders, you might want to also understand there's not a seat for everybody, right? And there's not a role for everybody. And so you also need to help each individual members develop outside, make them realize that they should not live out of the dividends, but they all need to work. They need to, create their own project. They need to have their own, and also I think it needs to remain fun, right? They need to have their own motivations, their own desires in life, and I think and that requires also mentoring, sometimes educating, introducing them to different people who can support their journey of and things that you can't necessarily learn in school. So I think that's an important one for the family and the next gen.
Yeah, how do they be their best version of themselves? How do they become productive members of society? I mean, these are all um, questions for any family, really. But certainly, I think there's some challenges when you talk about
I
families.
think we have clients that do an amazing thing also, and I find it fascinating that they do so. Is they also provide, like, some do. There's a lot of tools out there that exist for that. Some provide, like, they have these games where they're like, okay, here's $100,000. Either it's fake money, or some families even do it with real money. And like, okay, now invest in it. Make your mistakes. We're not going to handhold you. We're just going to do a report in 12 months time to see how you've performed and what you've done with with your investments. Have you done your due diligence? Once they get older, put them into situations that they will be in ultimately once they become shareholders and leaders. So I think it's important to have them make mistakes.
Yeah, that's a great way.
It's
Can they make mistakes in a way that they can learn from the failures in a safe manner, right? Next gen is obviously a lot different than the boomers and the Gen X's. You see the Gen Zs and the other generations digitally native. They have different attitudes about wealth. They have different expectations around technology. What are you seeing in terms of what's the impact is the next gen having on families and how are they driving kind of the customization and what they expect out of their family offices?
I think the next gen, what I see a lot with our clients, and we're fortunate to be working with a lot of very large family offices, very large family businesses in general, and it's not about the money. When looking at it from a next gen perspective, right? It's often not about the money, maybe because they don't yet own all the shares or have all the dividends or have all the assets yet, but it's not around the money. And when you speak to them and when you even see the activity on our platforms, what generates traffic on our websites and what generates interest and what generates questions is not the new investment that the family has done or a new business that the family has opened. It's more the impacts that those companies are having in society or on the environment or it's more like they I think that what the rising generation is mainly is that they want to inherit something or a business that is also ready for the future in a sense. And what that means is they also want to make sure that the businesses have the right values, but also are conscious about the world around them. And that requires many different things. Like a lot of our clients for that purpose also set up foundations because they realize and it's not just to please the next generation, right? It's they realize that the business and the family will be better off together by also solving crucial needs that have been in their local community or more larger disasters. When I see what a lot of family office and family businesses did to support the fires in Los Angeles, when I see that we have a lot of clients that have disaster programs whenever there's a hurricane in a certain country. There's a lot of philanthropy and money going out to support society. And I think this is having a lot of impact. When I see during COVID, I think this was the most eye-opening moment throughout the COVID. I think everybody was struggling, and the work that certain of our clients did to keep employing the company member, like to keep employment there, to keep them paying for, because their bills were still there. So even they're not working, they still need to be paid, right? And there's a lot of our clients that created the funds where shareholders got back in to support the employees, to support the business, to support the families, and I think that, I believe, is really what brings the next generation closer to the family and closer to the business, and wanting them to engage more. At least that's also what we see in terms of traffic on our platform, right? So I think that's a big one, is finding purpose in the business, and finding and having the right causes that are supported by the family, and letting the next generation be involved there too. Now, I think it also depends at what age you consider the next gen, right? I think if you're looking at a 16, 17-year-old, that may be more the case. I think there's also, I think the next gen, that are also in their 30s and 40s, I think they also look at how they can help grow the business, because they have a new world, a new eye to the world that their parents didn't necessarily have. There's a lot of disruption happening in every industry today. And I believe the next generation is often very well equipped to be able to see them, anticipate them, and I think giving the possibility for the next generation to define the businesses and the wealth of tomorrow, I believe, is extremely important, and we need to empower them once they start working.
I think that it's not just accumulation of wealth for wealth's sake, right? They want to have impact, and they want to have things that maybe weren't as prevalent or top of mind, such as sustainability, community, those type of things are more important to them. Certainly, what made the business successful in the past isn't necessarily going to make the business successful in the future. And that's where that next gen can really add a lot of value, right? As consumer preferences change, as the business environment changes.
About entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship, a Trusted Family is a good example of this entrepreneurship programs. And I think, families were built by entrepreneurs, businesses were built by entrepreneurs, and cultivating this mindset at the next generation is paramount. It's something that we need to continue pushing all around the world. And I believe it's also something that attracts a lot the next generation to be owners of their destiny, to be able to do what they like, and develop their own projects. I think speaks very nicely also to the rising generation.
You're coming to America in the fall. You're going to be relocating to Austin, great town. Why the move?
It's not for the heat. It's because it's 35 degrees here in Brussels today, and I'm having difficulties coping with that. But so no, it's not the heat that I'm looking forward to. But jokes aside, I think the US market has always been the biggest market for us at Trusted Family. Edward moved over there 6-7 years ago, started developing the market. We've always had a team over there in the US developing Trusted Family, and I think there are multiple reasons why we went faster in the US. I think the market is larger. In Europe, you need to deal with all these different languages. The markets are smaller. Certain countries have different structures, have different priorities, and so it's a more difficult market to penetrate. And so, in the US, it's one language, huge country, and lots of opportunities, right? And that's clearly one of the reasons. I think also the structures and the maturity of governance in the US is. I'm being recorded here, but I think it's. I do feel that the family offices and the family businesses, thanks to the trust and organ structures that they have, are really better, more mature, better equipped, and they have better structures there. Now, there are, of course, other regions. I think the Middle East is catching up a lot. But I think the US is a very mature market when it comes to family governance, and that is really critical for us, right? Because I think the family needs to have the right structure. Once they have the structure, then trusted family is a no-brainer. They need to run that structure, and that's where we come into play. So very much more professionally run, I would say, in the US than they are in Europe. They also come always to us with, like, they know what their problem is and they want to solve their problem. In Europe, I often need to educate the family on the importance of communication. I need to educate the families on the importance of governance. I need to educate the family on, why do you need to start planning for the future? And in the US, those are conversations that I don't have necessarily with families, because there's enough best practices, enough thought leaders in the country that have already well communicated this need and have helped families really be well established to be prepared for the future. So I think families in the US come to us with a pain point, and well, we're there to solve their pain points, right? And that's not and versus in Europe, there's a lot of time we need to educate the families on maybe potential future pain points that they'll have if they don't do anything. They're also more open to technology for some reason. I don't know if that's a generality, but yeah, they understand that having the right tools will help them perform better. It's a larger market, and it's where we have most of our customers today. So it was important for us to settle down. I'll be relocating, as you said, to Austin. We'll be building a team. We just hired 2 people right there, and looking to hire more to help develop the company further.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the US is a lot bigger in terms of especially talking family office market, right? It's a mature market. It's significantly bigger in size than really the other Europe, Asia, India. Certainly, there are other areas that are growing rapidly. The Indian family office market is growing very rapidly, but it is a mature market. The single family office model is well established, right? In
And
the
technology, when you look at all these softwares that family offices are using in the US, it's really driven by the US market. All
Yeah.
these that family offices are using, and so we need to be there. We need to be close to our partners. All the biggest family business advisory firms, they all started almost in the US and started to have grown outside. I'm making generality, but the biggest ones are in the US. That it be academic institutions, that it be family business advisors and practitioners. The most known companies out there today are US firms.
So I like to end the podcast on a personal note with 3 questions that have nothing to do with wealth tech. What are you gonna miss the most about living in Europe, and what excites you about living in the US?
What excites me first about living in the US is, so I've traveled all over the world. I lived I grew up in Singapore, and I think what I really enjoy also in my work today is just continuously meeting with, making new connections, working with new cultures. And I think it's different to do calls via Zoom than to really live in a country and experience it firsthand, right? So I think that's clearly something that's what excites me about coming and living in the US. It's to help to provide an opportunity also for my children to be able to open up to the world in a sense. I think with AI and the technology that keeps disrupting, I think the biggest asset you can educate your kids on is to make them socially capable of easily adapting with different cultures, speaking different languages. They speak Dutch at school. We speak French at home. Now they'll start learning English plus Spanish in Austin. So I think being able to easily make friends, easily adapt to different cultures, to different circumstances, to different people, I think is a really important uh, education. And I think that's what excites me about coming to the US. And then being closer to our partners. As I said, the biggest family business advisors are in the US. Being close to them, being able to have lunch with them, being able to have a beer. Maybe not the beer I won't miss. Maybe the wine a bit if you're coming back to what I'm gonna miss in Europe. The beer in the US has everything. The wine, I do feel, wines in Italy, in France, are might be missing me a bit. I think Europe is an amazing country because there's so much culture in the size of maybe Texas state, like
Yeah.
from Brussels, I'm an hour train ride to Paris. I'm an hour train ride to London. I'm an hour train ride to Amsterdam. And there are so many different cultures there, so many different people, so many different food, so many different ways of thinking. And I think it's one of the biggest assets, I would say, of Europe is to be able to, the quality of life, I think, is unique. But that's why I think it's also good to move, right? It's too nice to just not enjoy. I think it's important for the kids to see there's other things than Europe.
Well, you gotta love it. I mean, there's a great music scene in Austin, really thriving technology scene in Austin as well. Great downtown there. What with your work with some of the most prominent families in the world, what have you learned kind of personally from working with some of these families? How have they impacted you?
Maybe I can resume that in kind of three words. One is the humbleness. I think the families with whom I've been able to work, the biggest assets that I've seen and it has really helped me realize is like, it's not because you have a lot of wealth that, you necessarily that it's remaining humble. All of our clients, like the conversation I have, everybody is extremely humble about it. They're they really recognize the great asset that their father and grandfather has developed, and I think it's really important. And it's one of the big, a good lesson for me, when I've been working with all these families, is to realize that it's not about how much money you have, it's what you do about it, it's how it impacts you, and remaining humble, remaining honest about it, remaining true in yourself. I think it's a real value that I've seen working in this industry and working with our clients today, and it's really been a blessing. So I think being humble is a lesson that I've been able to learn with thanks to the work and thanks to the clients that we work with. I mean, a lesson that I've heard also is like to keep things fun. Life is too short. I think we need to make things fun. And working in this industry is a fun industry to be in. Of course, there's business to be made. The impact of the decisions that certain shareholders and families are making is humongous for the organizations. But there's a lot of fun in doing it. There's a lot of responsibility, but there's a lot of fun, and it's just it's really nice to be able to be with family members around the world who share the same beliefs, share the same values, and this desire to work hard, but also, don't take it too seriously either, because the business is bigger than any individual person. And then what I was amazed also and what I learned a lot is the whole impact. We talked about it a bit beforehand, but I think it's amazing the impact that these families have or are able to have. They realize it more and more, and they take more and more actions around it, and that makes it even fun. That makes it even funner. And so I think that's also a great lesson I've seen, is the impact and that families have had for their employees, for their communities, for societies, for the environment, whatever cause they support. It's really been fulfilling to discover all of this.
Yeah, they can certainly have significant impact on the communities that they're
Mhm.
part of. Like, I've seen it firsthand in cities like Chattanooga and Grand Rapids. Like the ability for these families to be able to kind of redevelop these downtowns, to make them thriving communities that people want to live in. I've seen it firsthand with some of the family offices I've worked with. They can have a significant impact on the greater community. And I think your points there about staying humble and having fun, I think that those are two great takeaways. All right, Anu, this has been great. I appreciate it. This has been a fun conversation.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Mark, for the opportunity. It's always a pleasure speaking with you.